make it, but you have to make sure that you have the IP on it. And then India is quite good in biosimilars. So these are all the areas that pharmaceutical companies, whether it's Pfizer, Merck, GSK, AstraZeneca, everybody is looking into that. If you have anything that you want to work on it, I'm here, I'll be interested to help you as to what exactly need to be done. And Bal Ganesh is also here, he can add his thoughts to it. Okay? So what is much more doable in an environment like this, where you are looking at a startup, you want to do something in a period of 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years, is listed in this particular slide. Okay? And these are doable because you have the expertise, and you need to have an expertise in one particular area if you want to have bigger pharmaceutical companies to look at you. And invariably that happens. I will give you one example. Okay, cancer. So many companies are working on it around the world. Okay, when people started working on immuno-oncology, okay, everybody started looking at assets in India, including me. I would go talk to various companies. Are you working on immuno-oncology? Are you working on immuno-oncology? Is there any way we can partner? But there was not much, except for one company you would know, and that is Curadev, okay, based in New Delhi. Okay, they had an approach which was very different than anybody else. Okay, that's the only company in India that stood out with regard to how they decided to work. It was only about 25 people, 30 people. Okay, working on a very different way of looking at cancer, immunotherapy, looking at some of the IDO molecules and other things. We can get into the details if there is more interest to it. And they said, this is it. There are hardly any players in this particular field. And of course, Roche signed a deal with them 2.5 years ago. That is the last big deal that we saw in India with regard to small molecule drug discovery. Okay? There are opportunities in novel biomarkers. It's again something that you can do. Drug formulation, I think it's important. Okay? That some of these technologies, either from your experience or your past experience, if you have some specific way, a niche area that you think that you'll be able to do the formulation, you should talk to companies and say, okay, this is what I can do, this is what is differentiating, and this is how I can help your company. Okay? You have to do quite a bit of work, okay? And have it prepared before you go and talk to people. And those things are very, very important. But also I want you to remember that companies coming up with these drugs, they already are 2 years, 3 years, 5 years ahead of you. Okay? I want to just give one particular example. When I was at Pfizer, and Pfizer was making Lipitor and selling, it's a $13 billion revenue generator for Pfizer, one of the best and most profitable drug for Pfizer. So somebody came to me and said, Ajit, I have a value proposition for you. Okay, I have one particular way of making Lipitor, and I know how to do it. Okay, and if you use that, you will save 20-30% of your manufacturing cost. I said, okay, that is very interesting. I'll be able to take it forward. Okay, can you tell me more about this? He said, no, I can't tell you because that is confidential, and I can't tell you anything about it. Okay, but that doesn't help me, right? If I go to my management and say there's something in India, unless you have something very, very solid, okay, you will not be able to take it forward. So, my suggestion is, if you have something on drug formulation, try to have something related, published, something presented in meetings, conferences, so that you have a larger crowd looking at the opportunities. Similar thing is on a drug, drug delivery systems. Again, there are quite a number of people trying to see how you can deliver pharmaceuticals through, through oral biologics. There are opportunities. Some companies are looking into that. Delivery through lungs. Delivery through. We saw some presentations on skin delivery and other things. So there are opportunities there. And one particular area that many pharmaceutical companies are working on are a microbiome. different than what's in the US. Is there anything that we can learn? So if any of you or any companies in India are working on microbiome, I think it's a very rich area to be in, to differentiate that the microbiome that you have is so unique that people in India don't get this particular disease because of this particular microbiome constitution in their system compared to the US or Europe and all. And definitely it is something that is valuable. Okay? Companies would be interested in looking at human genetic data. There are opportunities in companion diagnostics. I think it came up very well in Balganesh's talk and also yesterday as to how companion diagnostics will become part and parcel of drug discovery and development. So even if companies are following through what is happening in pharma companies and look at your capabilities and your interest to develop companion diagnostics, I think it can go a long way in convincing the pharmaceutical companies that you can be their preferred partner and work closely with them to take things forward. Medical devices, I think we covered it very well. And then, of course, markers for patient response. In many of these things, it is a niche area, and you may know things that other companies may not know, other pharmas may not know, biotechs may not know, okay? And that's why you have to kind of, capture that and start working on it, and then go back and, try to convince bigger players that, by the way, you missed out on this, and that's our expertise. Okay? That's one of the reasons why, when I was at Pfizer, we looked at many companies in India. There are companies, in pockets that are doing extremely well. Okay, to catch up with them, it may take Pfizer maybe another 3 years, 4 years. Okay, but such technologies are there. So Pfizer would not spend time and money developing such technology. You rather partner with them. And the technology that Mitra developed was one of those unique technologies for cancer diagnostics. Okay, the technology that they developed, they would have spent about 8 to 10 years. Okay, and they optimized it so well, and it will take somebody else years and years, including Pfizer, to develop such a system. So we just partnered with them. Such technologies exist to see, how patients would respond, and this is very, very important. In a pharma company, you may be able to develop a molecule, but it goes into the patient. You have to see how the patient would respond, and if you can get a learning right at the beginning that how the patient may respond, you will be able to position your molecule appropriately. Okay, okay. So broad areas of interest, I included chemistry. Anybody in chemistry here? No? Okay, okay. Yeah, so yeah, you can. I just put some slides here to show you what will be of interest to bigger pharmaceutical companies. Okay, if you have any novel libraries, green chemistry is something very good. New synthetic routes, okay, increased yield, less side products, and green chemistry is important. Savings on reagents. Again, there are a couple of companies that came up and said, Ajit, I have some technologies that will save money on this particular product of yours in reducing number of steps and reducing solvent utilization. Okay, if it is 10%, 20%, then I don't think anybody will look at it because it's not advantageous at all to change the entire system. If it is, twofold, fivefold, tenfold, then you are ready to do that investment to change your system. So it is something for you to look at. There were some discussions between us and companies here on looking at small molecular libraries, natural products from oceans of plants and microbes. Again, it is something that if you have any knowledge about it, I think it is definitely worthwhile looking into it, whether it is Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Merck, anybody would be interested in these technologies. Okay? So I want you to remember the first couple of slides that I showed you. Because the failure is so high, okay, we are all open to see how the attrition can be minimized, how we can make it successful so that the drug can come to the patient much faster through a collaborative way. Okay. Yeah. So what is required? Okay, I think I have 2 or 3 bullets here. Is anticipating the industry requirements well in advance. Okay, I think you brought it up, that anything that we are doing it here, if you are developing it in next 2-3 years, it will be obsolete. Okay, so you have to think, what will happen in 5 years, 10 years. I think Balganesh presented in his talk, because let's say you work with company X and you work with them for next 3 years and develop it. Okay, they would like to use it for another 5 years, 8 years. By that time, that the technology should still be valid. It should still be immensely valuable for the organization. They will not be able to change it again because of the amount of time and effort and regulatory aspect they went through. So, if you are thinking about something which is incremental, it may not be much appreciated in a pharma collaboration. Okay? Secondly, thinking differently than the existing industries. And we have seen that in India. There are some companies that are thinking very, very differently. I mean, in some of the posters that we saw, some of the products that we saw, people looking at individual cells to see whether it's cancerous or not. I mean, that is cutting edge. Okay? Or if you are looking at, I'm just giving some examples. If you are looking at, looking at TB, okay, and looking at amount of oxygen you take, breathing pattern, predicting that yes, this can be a TB. Okay, those are all very, very different. Or taking out very small sample of blood and looking at some biomarkers that will predict that this person may respond or may not respond. I mean, these are technologies that you may have experience, that you may have done it, and you would have had a lot of reading and expertise in that area. I think you have to just explore it more, have some solid data, and then go and talk with biotech companies or pharma companies that are interested in that area. Okay? When I say thinking differently, is that Pfizer and many other companies, they spend a lot of time. So many people are there, so many researchers are working on it. It is rare to think that you'll be able to come up with something that is very different than what they are. But in an environment that is here, okay, you may be able to do something very differently that they just skipped their mind. And you have to essentially cash on it and say, this is something unique, and if you are trying to catch up with us, it will be years. By then, we would have moved to the next generation system. So those advantages, I think you have to keep in mind whenever you venture into something so that you are ahead of the game. Okay. So what is required? Bitten covered it very well, differentiating approaches and solid data to support whatever you are saying. When you are talking with any of the partners, it's very, very important that you have a lot of data. Okay.
Style is, yeah. So from this, I'd like to quickly dive into. Now you have a brief sense of what the different styles of negotiation are. The types of negotiation that we engage with. Most of us are familiar and engaged with the distributive or the positional negotiating style. But there is another one which, again, was developed out of Harvard Law School by the program of negotiation by this very eminent negotiator, Dr. William Ury and Roger Fisher, which was the integrative or the interest-based negotiating style. How do we use more of the collaborative approach when we negotiate? We're always used to the soft or the hard bargaining style, right? The competitive or the collaborative or the accommodating style. But what is this interest-based negotiating style? So this we're all familiar with, the traditional bargaining. We stand at two opposite positions, extreme positions, and we work hard to kind of narrow the gap. Very often we're unable to narrow the gap and you walk out of the negotiation, or you are able to narrow it a little further and you might have a final offer that comes in a deal, right? Now this is the typical positional distributive negotiating style where we have fixed positions and we work towards narrowing these positions to be able to find a deal. Now, according to the research of, that came out of Harvard Law School, this is, any negotiation should be judged by 3 criteria. 1, it should produce a wise agreement. Now, what is a wise agreement? A wise agreement is one meets the legitimate interests of both parties. It resolves the conflicting interests of the parties, and it is durable. So these are the 3 things that constitute a wise agreement. One, meets the interests of the parties, the conflicting concerns are addressed, and it is durable. So that's one, a wise agreement. Two, it should be efficient. And three, it should improve, at least not damage, an existing relationship. Now, on that count of one, on a wise agreement, this form of negotiation is not necessarily very effective. Positional style negotiations are not, don't necessarily produce wise agreement. They can be very efficient, and they don't necessarily damage relationships, because relationships are not that important in these negotiations. But to remember that this style of negotiation has its pluses, but it doesn't work in every situation. Before you go, the assumption in this form of a negotiation is a fixed resource. There is only the 10 lakhs that you have to deal with. There's a fixed resource is the assumption of this form of negotiation, and it's the zero-sum game. In order for me to win, you have to lose. There is no other way for me to be able to get what I want. It's only when I get it out of you. And so you're always claiming value from the other side. These are the assumptions in this distributive form of negotiation that we typically engage with. When you engage in this form of a negotiation, a couple of concepts that you have to be familiar with. One is your BATNA. Anyone knows what BATNA stands for? BATNA is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So for any negotiation you go in for, whether it's the positional style or the interest-based style, go into the negotiation knowing what your alternative is. It basically increases your leverage when you go in knowing what will happen if this negotiation fails. If I walk out without a deal, what is my plan B? Your ability to negotiate, your leveraging power is higher when you know what your BATNA is. So experienced negotiators work hard on identifying and improving their BATNA before they go into a negotiation, right? So always make sure that before you go in, you know what your BATNA is. Second, know what your walkaway price is. It's very closely related to your BATNA. So if you are the buyer, what is the lowest price? I mean, the highest price that you're willing to pay for this. And you need to know what your alternative is to be able to ascertain what is that highest price that you're willing to pay. And if the seller, what is the minimum that you're willing to give? To be, if not, you're going to walk out of the negotiation. So, and your aspiration price. It has to be high. It has to be realistic. Keep your eye on the aspiration price during the course of your negotiation. Generally, when we go in, we're able to think of only one number. What number should you be thinking about? It's your aspiration price. When you close your deal, go back to your reservation price. So even if you haven't hit your aspiration, you know you've got your, you've probably done better than your reservation. And the other thing to understand is your opening price. Who is going to be opening in the negotiation? And why is that so important? I have a question for you. What is the population of Uzbekistan? Is it more or less than 4 million? Okay, just think. How many of you think 0 to 5 million? Huh? Yeah. Is it more or less than 4 million? 0 to 5 category, we have a whole bunch of hands up. How many of you think 6 to 10 million? Few. 10 to 20? Anybody thinks that is over 20 million? No way, right? But you know what the population is? It's 30 million. Now, why is it that nobody was willing to go up to over 20 million? It's because I anchored you at the range of 0 to 4 million, right? Cognitively, you weren't able to go that high because I gave you a number. I put a number out there between 0 to 4 million, and so you were not willing to go very high, which is why anchoring is opening is very important, because when you open, you're anchoring the negotiation. So use it if you have sufficient information. Guard yourself when you don't. Again, this is why you need to prepare yourself for a negotiation. We've had negotiations in our office where their opening is a ridiculous number, 10 crores. And it is because if the other party does not know that this is absolutely ridiculous, they get pulled into a completely defunct negotiation. It requires an ability to say, hey, this does not make sense. I don't know where you're getting your 10 crores from. Substantiate. So go into that negotiation knowing what what the ballpark is so that you can anchor if you can, but if not, you can guard yourself against it. Another thing that I found absolutely interesting, which I wanted to share with you, is in a negotiation, you have to give concessions, right? What is your concession strategy when you are negotiating? Look at the various options, A, B, C, D, E, and F. What do you think would be the most optimal? If I have $100 to give away as concession through my negotiation, what's the optimal way to give that $100 out? Call out A, B, C, D, or E, or F. F, E, or F? C, where you give it all at the end. The right answer is actually is actually F, right? And that's essentially because you are giving a high amount and you keep going low, indicating to the other side that I am giving strategy, I am giving concessions, but I am coming to the end of giving concessions. So by the time I come to my end, I'm done. I'm not giving you any more concessions. The problem with E is that you're communicating the exact opposite message, that I'm giving concessions, and as you push me, I will give you more and more, right? So F is the answer because as you give your concessions, you're indicating out, I am coming down to the end of giving any more concessions. The problem with C is that either if you don't give concessions in the beginning, they get fatigued. They probably will walk out of the negotiation. And right at the very end, just as they walk out, well, I'll give you my full 100. Now they don't understand. You're confusing the other side. Does he have another 100 to give me if I keep pushing and if I walk away? So you're encouraging I'll walk away out of this negotiation. So the communication is, I am giving concessions, I'm engaged in this in good faith, but I'm coming to the end of my concession giving. A practical, I mean, this is essentially when you give concessions, when you go into a negotiation, you're always going to be starting higher than what you want, right? You're going to be opening at your aspiration, going higher than what you want. As you start going down to go to your realistic, and you probably have examples, as you go down to get to your price that you're looking for, to be able to do it in a concerted way, to be doing in a concerted, regular, minimizing way.
Just to add to that, typically when you look at a contract, when you're negotiating a contract, price is not the only thing you negotiate on. Price is just one of the components. So when you're talking about this, so while she's talking about numbers, it may not be, your concessions need not be only on numbers. You can figure out what else can you give. What else is it that's important to you? So you need to look at the contract as a whole. Is term important for you? Is price important for you? Do you feel price is important for the counterparty or term? If you figure out something is not so critical to you, give them what they want. They will see that you've come down. You can say that, I have given you this, and then slowly go about it. But keep hold of what is very critical to you till the end. Hold on to that, so that is when you can say, see, I've given you a lot. I've negotiated on this, but this is something which is extremely critical to me. And this is maybe a walk away from me. Because I've given you a lot, and I don't see any movement from you. And this is important to me. I understood what's important to you. I've given you that. I'll give an example. If you're looking at investment agreements, shareholder agreements, there'll be things like decision-making powers. There'll be like your returns, the return that the investor expects. There will be things like how many board seats have to be there. Then there's the trickiest of all is, what is the valuation? How much is a percentage stake that the investor gets? How is it linked to EBITDA? What all do you need to get into EBITDA? And that's why even in EBITDA, there will be 10 factors that might need to be considered. You need to be able to justify why you want a change in the usual understanding of EBITDA because your business demands so. Or the fact situation in your industry is very specific, so it has to be excluded from EBITDA computation. Then you will say, this is something which is very critical to me, and I don't want to give it up, but I'm giving you concessions. Okay, fine. You want to have 2 directors on the board? I'm still controlling it with 4. Whether you have 1 or 2 doesn't matter. Take the 2. So you'll start giving them a lot of concessions and then slowly tighten it up when it comes to closer to things that are more critical to you. You don't want to give up on things that you want against what they want.
Perfect, thank you. So that was just quickly running through the positional negotiation or the distributive negotiation style. To introduce this interest-based negotiation, again, I have a quick exercise for you. I hope I have enough sheets of paper. I'd like all of you to, again, group yourselves. I have a negotiation for you to do. I'd like for you to group yourselves in group of two. One will be the representative of a drug company, and the other is a representative of a cosmetic company. So if you could, no, but you have to sit. Oh yeah, you can do that. Too much movement? In cosmetic. Yeah. Okay, we can do that. Then that'll be easy. And then if each drug representative could find a cosmetic representative, that might be a good way to do it. Shall we do it that way? Yeah? Yeah. They're not equally divided. Pretty equally, right? Okay, so then we'll figure it out. Yeah. So each of you are.
If some of you can't find a partner, then we'll.
I hope I have enough sheets of paper. Yeah, so all of you are representatives of all cosmetic, and all of them are representatives of drug. And my instruction is, each of your companies has found, if you're a representative of a cosmetic company, you have found a an amazingly effective cream for baldness. And the essential ingredient for this cream comes from this plant that is based in this remote island in South America. And you have to negotiate rights over that plant. Forget about IPR, you can't negotiate rights over a plant. But you have to negotiate rights, 100% rights to get this plant. You've been told that you have to get you have to try and get 100%, at least 75%, less than 75%, and you've lost your job. Meanwhile, the representatives of the drug company have found a marvel drug for osteoporosis. And you've been told that the essential element for this drug comes from this plant in South America, and you have to get the rights over that plant. Attempt to get 100%, at least 75%, less than 50%, and you've lost your job. So now both your CEOs have said, this is what's happening. You need to meet with each other and try and negotiate rights over that plant. So I'm giving you 2 minutes to read it, and then I'm going to give you another 3 minutes to do a very quick negotiation, and then we'll debrief.
And facts available to one are not available to the other. They're
Yeah.
different. Please don't share that.
Yes.
So if you've got facts, then that's not there, because facts are very specific. So
Yeah.
keep your facts to yourself.
And rights over the plant, it is very unlikely that you were able to secure that kind of information. You had to ask questions of the other side. Why do you need the plant? What would it take for you to get what you really need? If you have to get 100%, what would that look like? And when you were asked that question, was the other side afraid to share? Very much so. But was it actually dangerous when you shared that information? It wasn't. And that essentially is the negotiator's dilemma. We're constantly holding on to information for fear of our secrets being given to the other side. But if we don't share that information, you're not able to get into those situations where you're able to understand and share with the other side why you really need what you need, right? So
that can be very tricky sometimes.
Exactly. What to share?
What if both were pharmaceutical companies?
That both needed the...
No, both need different things, but you give off the idea that there is something in the stem that can create a potentially good product.
And as it reveals itself, they were both pharmaceutical companies. They don't need they don't need what you need.
Both of you in a situation where one company identified the value in the leaves and the roots, and the other knew that there is value in the stem. But
Reveal all the information that you have. But we do approach a negotiation holding much more guarded than we need to be. And when we are overly guarded, then we don't reveal needed information to be able to identify what the real needs of the parties are, to be able to perhaps get into these principal negotiation frameworks, and we stick to positions. And there is you have to be positional sometimes. You have to engage in that form of a negotiation strategy, but also to be aware of the other framework of negotiation called principal negotiation or interest-based negotiation. Now again, this concept of interest-based negotiation was built out of Harvard Law School by William Ury and Roger Fisher. And I take great pride in the fact that actually even before William Ury and Roger Fisher, there was a woman economist named Mary Parker Follett, who actually observed students in a library who engaged into a negotiation with each other. They were both studying at Harvard Law School. It was a cold winter's day, and one of them there was a fight about whether the window should be open or not. One student kept opening the window, and the other would go and close the window, and they would have this fight. Now, the librarian overheard this squabble between the students and went in to find out what is it that both these students were holding on to. Why is it that you want the window open? And one said, I want it open because I need some fresh air. And the other said, it's really cold when you open the window. There's a draft coming in. So what did she do? She just walked ahead and opened the window that was 100 meters ahead of both of them so that both interests were met. You had fresh air coming in, but it wasn't cold. So how is it that we could move from that framework of window open, window closed to I need fresh air and I need and I'm cold and I got to make sure that I'm not cold. And that was the whole principle of how do we integrate needs in a negotiation so we can expand the possibilities that are available to us and find solutions that are agreeable. This is again theoretical. I'd urge all of you to get this book. It's called Getting to Yes. It's a very, very small image that I have over there. Getting to Yes by William Ury and Roger Fisher. In fact, after this book, Roger Fisher came up with another book on, recently, his most recent one is How to Get to Yes with Yourself, which is an absolutely fantastic book wherein in order for you to be a successful negotiator, you need to first know what you want. And only when you're able to negotiate with yourself effectively are you able to negotiate with the other side effectively. So the key concepts, I only have time to whiz past the key concepts. I urge all of you to get this book and read it thoroughly. But the key concepts are separate people from problem, focus on interest, create multiple options, and use objective criteria. And trust me, whether it's been amongst the most major negotiations around the world, or you're negotiating on a much smaller value proposition negotiation, this technique has worked. When it came to Egypt and Israel over the Sinai, in the 70s, when they had that huge battle again, the war almost broke out. The negotiator, who was President Carter, was able to adopt this form of a negotiation style. Essentially, when he went into the possibility of what was motivating each of the countries, it was revealed that Egypt wanted sovereignty over the Sinai. This was Egyptian territory that belonged to them from the time of the pharaohs. But over years, it had gone into numerous hands, and they had just got it back. What did Israel want? Israel wanted security. That's why they wanted the Sinai. They wanted to have that buffer zone between them and the rest of the Arab world. So it came out as sovereignty and security. And that Sinai property had Egyptian flags flying high, but not a single Egyptian tank. So it was completely demilitarized zone. It was only by getting into these kind of principal negotiation, interest-based negotiation, they were able to form those wise, durable agreements out of those negotiations, right? So what does separate people from problem mean? I mean, to understand that instinctively, when we are in a negotiation, we join the person with the problem. The person is the problem very often. And when we have a problem, we are tough on the person and generally weak on the problem. But what we got to do is go easy on the person, be tough on the problem. How would I illustrate it? I mean, if you're dealing with, in your workforce, you're dealing with one of your employees coming in late, be tough on the problem of punctuality, but be soft on your employee. Get an understanding of what is causing this employee to be late. What is happening? And you might hear, my bike went into an accident and it went into repair, and now I don't have a direct bus route coming here. Options are possible when you're able to be tough on the problem, soft on the person. Separate person from problem. Focus on interest, we've been through this. Move from what do I want to why I want it. Go to the bottom half of the iceberg. Think of the Iraqi farmer story. Oh no, I haven't told you about the Iraqi farming story. I told you about the Egyptian story. Iraqi farmers, similar situation. In Iraq, around the time of Saddam Hussein, huge part of arable land had been leased out to the farmers. The farmers started cultivating. They had a 100-year lease, started cultivating. What happens? The oil company comes in. Oil company comes in and says, all of you need to leave because we have found oil over here. And if you look at the fine print of your lease, it says if oil is found, your lease agreement is gone. War broke out. They were ready to kill each other over this. The oil company was ready to bring in the army into it. Questions were asked around why. Principal negotiation was the framework at that point of time. Questions asked to the farmer, to the oil company. What is it that you're going to be doing with this land for the next couple of years? Answer, we're going to be doing mapping, surveying, seismic activity. That's what we're going to be doing for the next several years. To the farmers, what prevents you from leaving tomorrow the way the oil company is demanding out of you? And the answer, we've put in everything that we have. The harvest is in 6 weeks. You can't ask us to leave. When you move into interest, you see solutions that emerge. Solutions emerged along lines of continue your harvesting, continue your cultivation for the next 3 years. We don't disturb them as they do their seismic activity. After that, when cultivation is not possible, you be part of this, the oil company. Lots of options that came out. So essentially, when we move from this framework of the positions to being able to focus on interests, you're able to move into the needs, the goals, and what do I mean by interests? Needs, goals, concerns, fears, motivations. And trust me, these are very often considered the soft aspect of a negotiation. And we're very hesitant to go there. It's not the objective part, the hard numbers, but this is what drives the objective part of it. This is what drives those numbers. And if you have an ability to go here, you will be able to understand the positions a lot more. And very often, people get confused and defunct the idea of being able to go to this aspect of a negotiation. We always focus on positions, and remember that negotiations, the purpose of a negotiation are interests. How do we do this? It's essentially by listening, by understanding, asking those questions, curiosity. William Ury has this fantastic TED Talk, which again I urge all of you to listen to, The Art of Listening in a Negotiation, and why it is important for us as negotiators to be able to listen, because you are going to be able to get from the other side only if he can start listening to you, if you understand his mind. If you want to get something out of him, you need to know what he is thinking. And the only way that you can understand what he is thinking is if you listen to him. So the power of listening in a negotiation, the power of asking those questions, gathering information, not being the talker in the negotiation, being more of the listener in the negotiation. So some of these skills that can help us be more effective negotiators. Creating multiple options. So remember that in a negotiation, it is an environment that is stressful, that's driving you to results. Your creativity is impeded. Your ability to think of good options is compromised because you are thinking of one solution. We approach a negotiation as trying to bridge the results that both parties are holding closely to, and negotiation is about closing that gap. But if we approach a negotiation as no, there is not one single way out, we'll start with getting creative, come up with numerous options, and engage in a concerted time in the negotiation where you are just throwing out creative options. And allow the right brain to work. It is a creative part of the negotiation process. Once you create those options, then start evaluating those options and coming up with options that make sense. We often approach a negotiation with that single solution that you have to get. And when you go into that negotiation that way, you don't allow this aspect of the negotiation, which is a very critical aspect of the negotiation. So go in with multiple options, get creative with those multiple options, and then start evaluating to see which is the best possible option that can come out. And of course, the other important thing is to know, use objective criteria when you go into a negotiation. What does that mean? To be able to, very often we just go in pulling out numbers, coming up with stuff out of thin air. And it's a lot like horse trading. It's not informed decisions, informed offers, informed ideas of what you are proposing, why you are proposing, what you are accepting, why you are accepting. There's innumerable research out there with respect to what your sales agreement should look like, what your the other aspects should look like. So go into the negotiation using objective criteria as the standard to be able to substantiate your negotiation or any part of the negotiation that you are engaged in. So
there's a practical example I'll give. So this was about a year ago. We were doing a contract, which was it's a supply contract for API. And we went through negotiations, 3 days. We closed everything out. We were stuck on price. There was a significant gap between the price that my client was willing to supply at and the price at which the other party was willing to buy it at. So it was basically 2 days we spent just trying to negotiate on the price. And both parties were not, both parties negotiated, they tried moving towards each other, but they were not able to agree on the price. So over a lunch conversation, the other party was saying, this is something that we're looking at a long term and, we're not looking, this is a short term sort of a thing. So when everything was frozen, including the term, my client said, are you willing to extend the term? Are you willing to give me exclusivity for a bit longer? So the minute the other party said, yes, because technically you're my only supplier right now, and over the future, maybe there will be other suppliers who will come on, but I'm willing to consider that. So he said, if you're willing to give me that, I will come down to the price you want. So where the entire agreement was otherwise closed, we'd frozen the term, we'd frozen exclusivity, parties had given a handshake over that, price, which was a stuck point, got settled by reopening 2 agreed positions, because my client was of view, I can live with that price if I get exclusivity and I supply to him for a longer period of time. I will still manage to get better profits out of that than me supplying to him at a higher price for a short duration. I get a commitment, I get a longer contract. For me, it meets my cash flow situations and I'm very happy about it. So end result was you reopened something which was settled to agree on something which was a disputed issue. Another issue, and this is very recent, so this is something we're doing today. So how many of you know that you have this new insolvency and bankruptcy code, so a lot of companies are getting into winding up where secured creditors, etc. are going to court. My client had an OTS proposal by a bank. He could have gone, paid the bank the money, settled the dispute. The matter is closed and settled. He says, I don't want to do that. I want the bank to take me to the IBC. I want the bank to take me to the NCLT. I was very intrigued. Why is he saying that? He says, I have a lot of operational creditors. If I try to settle and negotiate with each of them, it is not going to happen. I'm looking at that secured creditor coming in and he mediating between all my operational creditors and trying to find a solution for me. Because if I do the conversation, nobody's going to listen to me. With a secured creditor who's sitting at the seat of authority, I have an OTS with him, I can settle. I know it's easier for me to settle with the secured creditor than with all my operational creditors. If I settle with a secured creditor, any of the operational creditors come into, take the matter to the IBC and file for liquidation of the company, I know I will get wound up. Here, I know I will have a resolution. So that's the difference. So strategy, how you think about it. And this is something me as a lawyer would not have really thought about it. He did, because he was an entrepreneur. He was a businessman. He knew that he wanted to revive the company and it was possible to do so. So he used the one strength he had, his creditor. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's essentially so to go back to the interest-based negotiation, this is the create value, you expand the pie. And your key takeaway at the end of the session, your key takeaway is to be able to support yourselves. Conflict, dispute is inevitable, as we started off. To be able to create yourself in an environment where you can walk out of that, you can resolve that conflict in the most effective way, in a way that makes sense for you, where you are in control. These are the processes that make a lot more sense, where you are in a negotiation, where if that negotiation fails, you bring in a neutral third party, whoever that might be the secured creditor, might be a professional mediator, might be a neutral mentor, a neutral third person into that mediation. Very often we bring neutrals, but they're not, we bring in third persons, but are they neutral? When they are not neutral, that does compromise the negotiation. That does compromise your ability to reach resolution. So to be able to set yourself up to be dispute-wise by having agreements, whatever your agreements are, that include these kind of frameworks, to be able to think about where are those relationships that are beginning to get strained. When they are beginning to get strained, who are the kind of people that I can bring into it? There are lawyers right now out there like IKTA who know the adversarial method, but also know these kind of methods. Legal strategists, as they are called, to be able to counsel yourselves with these kind of lawyers who know which strategy to use when, and to be able to approach conflict as strategically as you approach your business. And very often we don't think about conflict strategically. So at the end of the day, your agreements need to start looking different, whether it's your founder agreements, your vendor agreements, whatever your agreements are, make sure you have mediation clauses in them. When there are disputes that you are imminently dealing with, think about when you can use mediation. Always the earlier, the better. Start learning more. There are so many resources out there now that's coming in. Learn, equip yourselves on collaborative dispute resolution practices so that we can manage conflict, an inevitable aspect of business, more effectively. Thank you. If you have any questions, Ekta and I are available. I know it's the last session, right, of a 2-day program. So it must be a little exhausting right now to be flooded with that information. Yeah.